Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet your candle in person. We love Daddy. Daddy is good.
I
Reactions.
think the
Yeah.
Daddy candle is like probably of the four
Uh-huh.
color Monyu ones. I think the
Uh-huh.
Daddy one's my favorite. Probably
Yeah.
because it's the most like what I would want to burn at home. Um,
Mm.
but also it's just like sexy, like Daddy.
Everything about it, everything like the visuals. It literally just it spoke to me. In fact, when I got your box in the beginning, all that time ago, I actually kept this one and then I gifted the others. But figure eight, which I
Yeah,
remember,
yeah,
is still a scent that I really, really resonate with. Love
yeah.
that scent.
It smells clean.
It smells, yeah, and it has a very like, if I'm picking cologne, that's kind of like maybe in
So
the
you
vein
like
of what I would
more
like.
like gourmand?
Love,
Yeah,
love, love, love. Like I was just wearing,
I do too. I do too.
yeah, something sweet. I was wearing Princess the other day from Killian, and somebody in the street was like, "It smells like a woman in a candy shop," and I was like, "It's me. Like,
I'm the woman.
I am she. I am here." But look at this cute, ugh, and I miss this. Yes, I love this. I love this. I love this. So to commemorate our little conversation, we're gonna light the candle here.
Oh, cute.
I know. It's gonna scent this experience. It's gonna take us on a journey as we're going on a journey, which I love.
There we go for the camera.
Get it in the shot. I think that's good. We also love a proprietary lighter.
The okay, I love the intention letter, but my favorite
Mm-hmm.
part is on the back. Like, but the way they put the care or safety instructions on it, like
Mm-hmm.
no one knows that if you peel that off, it says Vigyl behind
I'm
it.
going to be honest. I had a very similar experience the other day with another lighter.
It's like
So
hidden.
it is hidden, but I kind of like that. No,
It's
yeah,
probably better that
I did.
they covered it that side because I do call it the intention lighter, so that no one really know what it was. But
I feel like I've intentionally removed that. Wait,
yeah, it took work.
so that's the guidance I got from it.
Well, honestly, it was kind of funny because
Mm.
uh, like this idea of intention, having intention behind what you're doing.
Yeah,
And then I was thought about this line of like it's in the side inside the box to write light me with intention.
yeah.
And then when I had the idea to do a lighter, I'm like the lighter should be called intention
Intention.
because then it's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah,
kind of funny if for people who have the lighter like
yeah.
they see the
You see
connection.
it? No, I
But
love
also
it.
just funny for me to know that that's why I did it. It's kind of stupid, but
I mean, if you're not hiding a little secret in your product, what are
yeah,
you doing?
yeah,
Right?
I agree.
Is what I feel.
I
But
should
very
find more
nice
of
to.
them.
You should. You should always have fun with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know you a little bit well through your product, obviously. But who are you? Tell people who you are. What are you about?
My name is Stephen Michlits.
Mm-hmm.
I am a designer
Mm-hmm.
and kind of I categorize myself in between like halfway between designer and artist.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm the another word I don't like founder of Vigyl Candles.
Yeah.
I think maybe I prefer creator, but like that sounds
I feel like you are the
or
creator, founder,
designer.
creator,
Yeah,
daddy
the
of
daddy,
Vigil, you
the
know,
original, the OG
the
daddy
OG daddy
of
of
Vigyl.
daddy, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else I would say about myself.
No,
I'm
I mean
still like
that's a
I'm
pretty good summary though. One thing I would say is this, right? Like from and I can maybe add to a little bit of what you've said about yourself is that I feel like you're a vibe creator. There are moments with you, aesthetics. I also feel like I've learned a lot about scent through some of your product, which is really cool. I feel like you're an educator in that regard. So,
oh,
there's a lot of elements to what this is and what this journey's been. So, very nice to meet you
you as
and talk to
well.
you a little bit today about Vigil and how we got to Vigil, but also what your personal journey was, to get to that point, right?
Totally.
Yeah. When it comes to like Vigil as a brand, what is Vigil as a brand for you?
Well, I mean, on its face, Vigyl is a candle brand.
Mm-hmm.
It's that elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, has been like the kind of bane of my existence
Yeah.
because it is a candle brand.
Yeah.
In my head, Vigyl is a lifestyle
Yeah.
brand. I've released candles so far, so I think most people associate it as a candle brand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Vigyl, so originally, even just the name, like, so the name Vigyl, obviously there's an association with the word Vigyl with Vigyl candles
Yeah.
in terms of like the type of candle that is used for a candlelight vigil, right? And that's kind of where the original uh, inception of the name came from. But it was more so that it wasn't a morbid, like, not that because that could lean kind of like into uh, a morbid place or something, like dealing with death. But my thinking behind it was kind of abstract. Honestly, most of my thinking is kind of abstract, and I feel like I understand it in my head, but then I go to explain it to someone, and it's not as easy to verbalize.
Yeah.
But it was really around this idea of like, kind of like life is short, and like the idea of a vigil is like a candlelight vigil is like all these people coming together to remember someone or to like have a moment of observance for them.
Yeah.
But then I was like, but how many times do people take that moment for themselves? Like, why do you have to be gone to have that moment?
Right.
So then I was like, every time I was thinking like, well, conceptually then, like with Vigyl candles, every time you light the Vigyl candle, it's like you're taking a moment or rituals of observance for yourself. Like, it's not really, it's about you, like your own kind of moment there. That's kind of where I was going with it originally, and like it's kind of evolved a little bit from there. But that's kind of where the name came from. I think like in the past few years, the candle industry specifically, but I think a lot products in general there's been a real push around like being present in your buying decisions and how you spend your time and all these different, but it's kind of like I was very drawn to that concept. And I think even with Vigyl, I kind of wanted to take it even a step further and kind of have your own, like, how can people have their own sense of like autonomy, or I don't know what the word is, but basically I made certain design decisions with Vigyl, such as I left off the fragrance notes on the boxes is one of the ways, right?
Yeah.
In my head, conceptually, I was like, okay, I really want to force people to have to pick up the box and decide if they like it for themselves.
Right.
Not just because it says it smells like champagne or because it says it smells like peaches and cream. Like, no kind of, and also there's kind of like a lot of like greenwashing or like wellness washing, I would say, in a lot of candles where it's like, you know, I only burn candles that are clean burning and soy wax and smell like eucalyptus, and like that's supposed to be somehow better. But the reality is like the majority of candle brands now use soy wax. They are clean burning. Like no one wants to have soot all over their
100%.
place. Like these are all baseline things in the candle industry at this point. But I was kind of getting sick of seeing like eucalyptus and like really natural things, because fragrance can be so much more fun than that. And like, but you have to kind of, you know, have your own sense of agency with like what you like and what you don't, not what you're kind of being prescribed.
Exactly.
And so going back to where I started, that's why I left off the fragrance notes, because I didn't want it to feel prescriptive. Like I wanted people to look at the artwork, to see the name, and to pick it up and smell it, and then decide like, oh, this one's for me or this one's not for me, based on like storytelling and based on like vibes, basically, not based on like what the blend is. Because the reality is, what do people really know? Like when you read a fragrance
100%.
notes, like, do you really know what amber and tonka bean smells like?
But that's the thing, right? Like, and I think you're very spot on with an element of that, right? Like, especially because it being a product that obviously no one maybe has context on, the matter of preference comes from what you're directly communicating to them, whether it's through the branding, whether it's through how you're presenting that product to them, and then you're kind of guiding them into your product. I think that's really, really key. But you're right, like a lot of people don't have it in their lexicon to talk about scent in that way. We also talk about scent in a very objective way, when in reality scent tends to be very subjective. Our memories are our own memories, and that really dictates how we actually experience smell. So you're right, like when someone's seeing something like tonka bean on a box, and if you've never experienced tonka bean, you're like, I guess this is what a tonka bean maybe smells like, but also maybe my reference of a tonka bean is something else that I had, you
Yeah.
know? And
But it's
so,
also presented in layers, right?
yeah,
Like the
the
notes,
notes.
right? And it's like when you have a list of
Yeah,
notes and you have your middle, your base,
yeah,
all of this, like, do you really know, does it really mean anything to you?
100%.
You know?
100%. And I feel like no one even looks at scent in that way, but we are being educated to try to look at scent in this way,
Yeah.
right? Which I feel like, unless you actively came from, unless I went into a perfumer's shop and I was being guided through how to smell or how to experience, it's a challenge. It's the same thing with wine, I feel like, in many ways, because people will drink a wine based on these tasting notes, but in reality, your tasting notes are, again, so tied to your personal
Yeah. And the real
experiences,
tasting
right?
is a little bit
Real
different,
tasting
I'm
is so
sure.
different,
Yeah.
right? So I think the same way, and that's what one thing I loved about experiencing this was that even when I opened the box, I felt like off the bat, I can just tell from the scent it's what's going on here, and you really put it, very concisely when you said it's about the vibe, it's the aesthetic. That's what I
Yeah.
genuinely feel like you
And
really
I
communicated.
wouldn't, I'm not going to hang my hat on the concept I had to leave the notes off the box
Yeah,
because it was definitely an experiment.
yeah,
I wouldn't do it again.
yeah.
Like, I think that actually, I think it was a misfire on my end. I thought I was
Mhm.
doing something cool and edgy by leaving it off,
I think so.
but I think that maybe it was unnecessary because for people who don't understand what I was trying to do,
Yeah.
they just are confused about what it is. And that
Hmm.
actually has been feedback that I've gotten with the brand is
Yeah.
that it is a little bit too conceptual.
Yeah.
And like, but for me, I am a very aesthetic person. I am very much, like you said, a vibes
Hmm.
person. That's kind of how I shop. That's kind
Hmm.
of like, I have a strong sense of what I like and what I don't like. And when I
Right.
see something, it doesn't matter what's on it. It's like
Yeah.
what I see it, I like it or I don't like it. And I
100%.
design this that way. Whereas I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of people who are a little bit more like analytical or have different ways of making decisions. And it's not always the right idea to go against kind of the market norms.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely, going forward, be a little bit more, maybe not necessarily putting on fragrance notes, but a little bit more
Mm.
descriptive about what's
Hmm.
on there. I think it also becomes more challenging from an e-com space because
Yeah.
even though on the website I do list the notes, I think it is still. Here's another example. So when I shot all the photography for the first line of Vigyl candles in the white box, um, it was my decision and my direction to not shoot the candles with
Hmm.
the ingredients romanced around them.
Hmm.
So if there's lime and cyclamen and neroli and these things, I didn't put the
Hmm.
flower and the fruit and
Hmm.
the around it to try and paint the picture, which is very common in when you see candle
Yeah.
product photography. It's all
Yeah.
about like the fragrance notes are displayed
Yeah.
for you. I went completely editorial, the
Yeah.
opposite way, and I was like my hell yes candle is like falling from the sky with thorns, and it's like
Yeah.
I can totally see how someone looking at it would be like, well, what the hell does it smell
This.
like? Like, how do I know? But for me, I'm like, this is the story I'm trying to tell. This is
Right.
sexy. This is like,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to approach the brand more as like how you approach fine fragrance, like
Yeah.
personal fragrance.
Yeah.
If you see uh, an ad or a campaign for any
Yeah.
fragrance, um, it's not the model surrounded by the
Hmm.
ingredients. It's the model in a situation that is reflective of the vibe of that
A hundred
scent,
percent.
the sex or the glamour,
Yeah.
or unless sometimes if it's like a very gourmand fragrance, I
Yeah.
can see that, like, you know.
I mean, that's hard to sell through a lifestyle, but I get you.
So I was
Yeah.
trying to take that approach with
Yeah.
it. But again, it's I think been a slower payoff just because it's not maybe as literal as
Hmm.
what people are expecting with candles.
Right.
Um,
It's a really good point that you bring up there, right? Because I feel like even in everything you've just kind of talked about, there's been a little bit of a shift, even in terms of how you've seen your brand kind of grow. And a lot of that has obviously been dictated by a lot of the data and analysis that you've done on what you've actually seen as reactions, right? Whether
yeah,
that's feedback, whether that's how people actually talk to you about the product, or whether that's even like in your metrics that you gather around this. How much of that do you feel you actually take into your next iterations? And how much of that do you actually like leave behind? You're like, you know what? I saw this, but I'm still staying true to who I am.
it's a good question.
Mm,
I think like I'm a very stubborn person,
yeah,
so it's my vision
good.
is kind of the direction I take.
Yes.
But there's like undeniable learnings that you can be flexible with,
Yeah.
like the what I just talked about with the ingredients or the fragrance notes, for example, or I am introducing now more photography on social that does include ingredients. Like I did a version of the new Hanlon's campaign that was very editorial and you know more of like a still life, but without any of the ingredients. And then I did a secondary one where there are coconuts and there are pistachios,
Right.
and there is kind of seafoam that looks like sunscreen because that's what that candle smells like.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to balance both of them now, but trying to figure out a way that still feels elevated enough without being like kitschy, I guess I would say.
It's true. I mean, you could really go that Yankee Candle route where it's literally just like a stock image of like a marshmallow, and that's exactly what this candle smells like, right?
But it's not. It's also like the fragrances themselves also like it isn't that, right? Like Yankee Candle, if it's called black cherry and it smells like black cherry, it's called pumpkin spice, it smells like pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
The fragrances that I selected and developed for Vigyl in a lot of ways are more mirrored by personal fragrance, in the sense that like you don't really necessarily know what you're smelling, but it is an experience. You know what I mean? So 100%. Even when I pull out like the Hamlin's one, for example, like it is easiest to pull out like an element of sunscreen, because that is something when I say to someone, it smells like sunscreen, they're like, oh yeah,
no,
it's
it does.
a great sunscreen, but it has that element in there.
Yeah.
And like for the figure 8 candle, like the gourmand element is fig. That's why I called it figure 8 as opposed to calling it a fig in something. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to be a little bit more complex with the communication, because I think the fragrance is more complex and kind of deserves I don't know if the word's like intellectual approach or like makes you feel a little bit. I want you to feel something more than I want me to dictate what you're 100%. Feeling, you know?
But that's what I liked about it, right? Like I think that the sophistication in how you actually present a lot of what's here, the storytelling is everything, because I think the story really sells me the product. And to your point, like I think, the average buyer maybe is not going out there and saying to themselves, I'm looking for a vibe. Maybe sometimes people are just like, I want a candle that is kind of smells like these 5 things, and this is what I want, right?
Yeah.
But I think when you have experienced certain things, and especially if you're like a scent lover or someone that just appreciates kind of, just looking at the more holistic element of what a brand and product is, then it becomes a little bit more okay to say, I'm buying into a vibe, I'm buying into a mood, right? And I think that those are kind of like very key, I guess, differences between like the average buyer and maybe somebody that's kind of like buying based on experience.
I think also a lot of it though is like going into my background, because I worked for a number of years in product development, in mass retail, and candles was one of my categories for a long time. Like I worked in that space where it was very literal, very prescriptive. And that whole industry is very much like that. And I loved it. Like, don't get me wrong, I love retail. But it was kind of the impetus for why I started Vigyl, was because I just felt like there was something more. I could be more creative with this. Like, why does this have to look this way? Why does this have to be presented this way? Can't we try and do something that's a little bit more provocative?
100%.
Or can't we try something that is like, thinking outside of the box? And that was really what made me want to start the brand, was just this idea of like, if I didn't have someone else telling me what to do, or if I didn't have a brand guide from this big retailer that I had to follow, and if I could really just try and put all my different creative ideas to create something that's a little bit more unique, how could I do that? And what would that kind of, what would I want to say with that? Or how would I want to present? And the result has kind of just been this like Vigyl vibe that is very much me, but also very much like kind of what like I would like to buy,
And I feel like because it is your brand, I feel like that should be a reflection of how you are. But I also feel like you're right. There needs to be a disruption in what this space is, right? And I think that if you haven't offered people a different way to look at a product, people are never going to know. right? So I feel like maybe this is the early kind of stages of people actually trying to become a little bit more divergent in their thinking about buying,
Yeah.
because they're like now saying, oh, like look at this, and it's something that's accessible to me, that I can actually like directly connect with. So I feel like that's really really key. A
As
part of
as we're saying this, so I
yeah.
am realizing that there's a difference though now because it's like the vibe,
Yeah,
which is what I'm going for, right? Like I
yeah,
try to create a brand that's a vibe, but
vibe.
it's like a vibe like I want people to immediately connect with when they see the product, when they see the packaging design,
Yeah,
when they see the typography, when they
yeah.
see kind of all the elements. But it is a direct like to your immediate consumer
Hmm.
vibe as opposed to probably doesn't actually work in my favor in terms of gift giving, which candles are a
Right.
huge gifting thing. So
Yeah,
like, it's very safe to buy a candle for someone that
yeah.
is like I don't know, evergreen scented at the holidays or like smells like, I don't know, apple cider.
Yeah,
But when it's something that is like a little bit more provocative or a little bit more, you have to really think about it,
yeah.
you might have a harder time gifting something.
I think yes and no. I mean, this is my personal opinion and my personal experience gifting some of your candles before. Is that I think people really, the one reaction I had got when I gave people the box
Yeah.
was like people were very into what the box was, right? They were immediately just like, oh my God, like this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it looked expensive too, which I feel like it is expensive in its own way. Its presentation is like, it's giving wealth. But I also think when people smelled it and then people were like, no, this doesn't smell like a traditional candle to me. It was when they began to ask me, like, where did you buy this, right? And like, what was this kind of experience for you?
Can I stop you for 1 second? Do you mind if I get my sunglasses?
Yeah. One question I actually had is really like, what actually started your scent journey? Like, what got you into scent and smell as a whole? Were you always into this?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say yeah. I like, well, honestly, when I was a little kid, I like very little. I remember one of my uncles
Hmm.
for Christmas
Hmm.
bought me a bottle of cologne. It was the
Hmm.
first like fragrance I ever had. It was CK1,
Nice.
and from that point on,
Yeah.
I feel like every Christmas I would get fragrances from people because they
Yeah.
knew I loved it all of
Yeah.
a sudden, and like I like in my bedroom I had all of these like, I mean, not super nice colognes. I'm talking about like Dracar Noir and
I mean,
Eternity,
at that
Calvin
age,
like
are we getting
yeah, of
like
course, of
Tom Ford?
course.
No.
I had Tommy Hilfigers, like those. But yeah, so I loved it. I
Yeah.
just felt like it was like part of my wardrobe almost, or part
Yeah.
of my personality was to put it on. Um, and then definitely like my mom always had a candle burning in the house,
Hmm.
and it was very it was that like a Yankee Candle vibe, but
Hmm.
I loved it. Like
Yeah.
very gourmand also, but
Yeah.
it was just something always like when we finished cleaning up the house on a Saturday, she would light the candles, and that was kind of like the sounds stupid, almost like a treat for me
Hmm.
was to have that candle lit and to be
Yeah.
like, oh, like enjoying that fragrance in the house.
Absolutely.
Um, and definitely as I got older, that became like a ritual for myself as well. But
Mm.
always like when I'm traveling or if I'm out and about, uh, I'll always go to the personal fragrance section
Hmm.
and try things out and see what's unique there and see if there's
Hmm.
anything interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and beyond even just like candles and personal fragrance, but like even hand lotions and like, I don't know, creams. Like I love all of that.
I mean, it's one of the things that like made me really like your candles in the beginning was that it almost felt like they were something that I could have bought in a bottle, right? Like I could have easily seen this as being something that I could wear
Yeah.
on my body.
A lot of people have said, well,
Yeah.
have asked me, like, would you ever
Would
want
you ever
to
do it?
go
Yeah.
into the fragrance world? And
Yeah.
the answer is yes. I
Yeah.
think it'd be a lot of fun to do it.
Yeah.
I think I'd want to like go. I wouldn't want to use like a stock bottle. I wouldn't want to like. I'd want to create
I
something
mean, you
really
never used the
custom.
stock candle casing here because this is this. When I saw the embossing in the beginning, I was like obsessed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. The glass one I left. It's the same shape, but
Mm.
it's just there's no embossing.
Mm.
Um, and when I first when I so I wanted to make sure that what I feel like maybe I'm like a bit pessimistic in the
Right.
sense of like when I see certain brand messaging always for me gets me
Mm.
because I feel like I'm always on a journey to try and figure out what my brand messaging really hone it in.
Mm.
But I'll see things like I'll see a lot of other candle brands saying that like their candle vessel is reusable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no one's reusing that for
Yeah,
anything. It's very obviously a candle jar.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really use it for anything else. And they're like, oh, you can use it for succulents and all of this stuff. And I'm like, you could, but I don't think anyone's going
to do it. Yeah.
And so when I did the glass Vigyl vessel when we first launched, like I was very intentional that I wanted it to be able to be used as a drinking glass after. And so that shape, I wasn't gonna be able to find something in the market that was gonna work for that. And so I designed it custom and made sure that it was borosilicate glass, so it's hot and cold safe. And actually looks good as a drinking glass. Like it is something I feel like I'd buy it like, I don't know, like CB2, like a cool drinking glass. But for that reason, I left the branding off of it. So I was like, even a lot of times brands that say reuse my vessel, if there's a logo on it, I'm like, what are people really going to use it for? Because most people don't want to have branded, drinkware in their cupboard. So I left it off, but looking back, like it is something I kind of revisit now in my head a little bit. Like, should I, when I restock my glass, should I think about putting the logo on there? Because it is a bit of a missed opportunity when it comes to photography or when it comes to people tagging the brand. They see the photo looks great, but it's like, and I'm tagged, but you don't see it right away. Like there's not an immediate brand awareness piece.
Which is true. I feel like that's something that you're obviously having to keep an eye on, because at the end of the day, like that is an organic way of promoting what's there, right? And I think like looking at the glasses and the jars themselves, I feel like that already makes a statement in what it is, and I loved that element of it. So
so then with this one, when we did the ceramic, I kind of went the opposite way, because I'm like, honestly, who's really going to reuse this? Like, I have had people tell me that they use it for like an Americano in the morning or things like that, but I was like, I didn't want it to, because it was ceramic, it doesn't lean as much drinkware. So I was like, I can put the branding on this, but I wanted to do it in a way that was, again, I think I always end up leaning towards these more abstract concepts where I was like, let's do it in a way where it wraps around. So it's not like, from no angle do you see the full word Vigyl, but it almost just creates a pattern that goes around it. And it feels a little bit sexy, but maintains the form, the signature form that I originally started with.
No, it's very, very cool. I've always been a big, big, big fan of it.
I did have a big buyer from a retailer though, who I would love to be in, actually reject this line because of the logo on it.
Really?
They're like, well, no one's going to know what this means. I'm like, well, not if it doesn't get in your store. Like, obviously, this is the point.
I'm like, isn't that like the thing? That's a really good actual segue into, kind of what we can talk about next a little bit, is what is that sort of journey for you right now, right? Like in terms of like, when you're trying to get your product out there, how are you attempting to get your product out there?
I was pretty lucky when I first launched Vigyl, because like within a couple of months, I got an email from Essence, which was on my number one dream board place I wanted to be.
That's the perfect place to be.
Yeah. They reached out, and the buyer, she was from Toronto at the time, and she was like, I love this brand. I'd love to bring it on and let's test it out. So that was amazing. So right away I got into Essence. Shortly after, I got into Indigo, and I actually kind of, engineered the second line, this one very much with that Indigo customer in mind, in terms of price point, in terms of, offering more of a variety of different fragrance profiles. Like in the original line, I didn't have anything that was kind of in the more gourmand world. Whereas in the new Monument collection, I have the Figure 8, and even the Pompeii candle, even though it's spicy, it still has a very citrus scent to it. So in the beginning, yes, my dream board was all about getting into retail. I think because that's where my background is, that's where I felt most comfortable. I thought, that's where volume is, and it is. But I think that you have the most control over your image and over building like an authentic connection with your customer through e-com. And also the margins are terrible with retail unless you have huge volumes, which currently I don't. So I am very much right now focused on that e-com experience and like kind of revisiting everything from the customer experience standpoint, to optimize and make sure that it's presenting the way I want it to really you know, build that loyalty.
Yeah, and that following.
And that, you know, I think it's also the most fun, just because, again, you get to control every touch point, right? And
Right.
like you get to, for me, I love the visuals, so I get to really hammer in as much as I want. I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about if I post this maybe a little bit more risque image, is it gonna affect my standing with this retailer or with this retailer? Is it, am I pushing the boundaries too far? Am I isolating anyone? I actually think it's the way that you can really figure out who your actual customer is, because when you're in a big retail store, like their goal is to get everyone through the front door.
Correct.
Whereas you get to kind of decide by, you know, some strategic filtering methods, I would say, which is basically how you present yourself.
Yeah.
Kind of curate who your customer is.
Totally. I also feel like you have the opportunity to even, like for me at least, you know, with a retail experience, you are a candle amongst many candles.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas now, when I like meet you through Instagram and I see what you've got through there, or through your website as well, I feel like I can actually start off on what I feel like is a journey for you, because I understand the stage that you're at as a brand a little bit better. I also think like when I come in, I'm like, okay, I'm actually like invested in this in a different way too, because maybe I'm like, I want to see what else they're going to come up with. Where are they going to go next? And I also feel like there's this chance to diversify really quickly with what you've got, right? With retailers, you typically are like, these are the 5 things that I always need to have, right? Whereas on your own, you could be like, guess what? Tomorrow we've got like a new option for you, completely different.
Yeah.
Deviations are like par for the course, right?
Yeah. You can definitely be more reactive. You can
Yeah.
definitely be more experimental.
Yeah.
That's something I really need to do more of, is, you know, just like small limited edition drops.
Yeah.
Try things that are a little bit more experimental. I think that because I, you know, started off by doing everything custom, I kind of was averse to not having like fully customized packaging, fully customized vessel for any of those things. Like typically, if you do something, like if you're just testing something out, you only want to do 100 units. You're not gonna maybe invest in the custom box and dust cover and insert the way that I have with the rest of the line. So I was kind of like, well, maybe that's not me. I don't want to. I don't want to do anything cheaper or anything that doesn't feel like it's like a fully realized idea. But the longer I'm doing this, the more I'm, you know, kind of finding ways to economize stuff, so that, you know, maybe I will in the next couple of months have a standard on the same level as the rest of Vigyl, but a standard box that is my special edition or limited edition box, and I can use that to do different drops.
100%.
As opposed to, you know, trying to just, you know, get a blank box so that I can try an idea, you know?
No, I absolutely understand that. No, I think that that's like the way to go. And I also feel like, again, even in you talking about this, I feel like there is learning, right? That you're making, and you're kind of figuring out how to still be true to who you are while still kind of acknowledging a lot of what I guess the industry is kind of telling you and what you're kind of getting from outside, right? One thing I actually was very, very curious about too is the process that it takes you to actually come up with these visuals and the aesthetic of the brand as a whole. Because I feel like the brand identity is really strong for me. It's what drew me to the brand in the beginning. I think when I first like started following you, I was all about the visuals. How much of that storytelling is, you know, how much are you like, how precious are you about the storytelling, and then how are you developing that storytelling?
I wouldn't say it's like precious. I would say it's more, it's very organic.
Okay.
Like I do it all myself. So even like the storytelling on this on the side, like I write that, like all the way from designing the vessel to picking the fragrance to designing the packaging to writing the copy. Like I do all of it myself.
Right.
And unless I've had great opportunities to collaborate, like with certain artists like Nico Caccini for the Hanlon Scandal. But I would say it's not precious in the sense of, it's like once I see it, I know what it is. Or like sometimes I'll see an image or something will inspire me, and I'm like, oh, that's the crop of this vibe that I'll put in my head bank of like, this would go great for a candle in this kind of world once I find that smell that I'm hoping for that.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of, I describe it more almost like putting together a puzzle, I would say, where it's like, even down to the colors, like figuring out like what the right color is for each of these. Like it's almost like I'll create a mood board and then work back from there. And then once I have the fragrance, then I kind of sit with it a little bit. And usually the name will come to me with the fragrance. And then after the name, I'll start kind of writing out what the storytelling is that's on the side of the box.
Yeah.
And that piece for me is not precious either, because it's very much like trying to just figure out like, okay, like this fragrance, like this smell, like what's like this moment that I'm trying to capture with this. And it's like a little bit lofty, a little bit abstract as well, but it's really about the words that are in there that are meant to kind of signal the vibe.
The vibe.
Yeah.
No, that's really, really cool. And I feel like that is something that I think a lot of people also take for granted when they look at something like this. They don't understand that depth of actual work that goes into actually getting it to this point, which I feel like I really respect when I see a lot of your product, and I see a lot of that in there. One thing I was also very curious about is, what is the impact for you when it comes to, your own personal tastes and your own personal ideas, and then kind of bringing that into your product versus what you're trying to see is kind of maybe something that's more on trend, and then you're like, oh, maybe I should actually bring the trend in as opposed to my personal taste into this.
I think that it's hard because I very much like I follow trends in terms of like I mentioned earlier, like my background, but also just I'm a consumer, right? Like I get excited by them. Like there's a reason why they're trends in the first place. So I do find myself, especially with content creation, I'll see things on social, or I'll see something happening and I'm like, oh, how could I adapt this to try and do a Vigyl version of this, or like tie this in? And there are a lot of times where I'll go as far as making content, creating something or creating an image. And then I'm like, I'll pull back a bit and like, is this actually Vigyl, or am I just excited about this because I like this, what I'm seeing? And so I will make edits on that type of stuff. But I mean, my goal with the brand is really to be more like inline or core in a sense. I don't want it to feel seasonal or trendy. I want it to feel like, the brand has been out since 2021, especially the first white box line. And to me, I still like them as much as I did then, because I didn't go super 2021 trendy with it. And I also didn't do like, the fragrances themselves are timeless. They're not seasonal in any way. So it's like, you can burn them any time of the year. The packaging still holds up. The design still holds up. I wanted to, there's like an element of the whole brand also to me, which is like the objects. Like, yes, it's a candle. Yes, it's about the fragrance. Yes, all of this. But like, I also wanted it to be something as a unique object that lives in your home with you whenever, and year over year, it's not something that is going to feel like it's tacky in 2 years.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like that's really, really interesting to hear, because I feel like that sort of impermanence of even what a candle is, but then giving it a sense of permanence, just it being present in your life that long, I feel like kind of is already the disruption in what a candle is, right? Like I think that takes away from our traditional thoughts about what a candle could be. When it comes to when you are working right now and you're kind of like getting the brand, a little bit more further into the world each time, what are some of the difficulties that you face, having a brand of your own and kind of working on this brand on your own?
Difficulties? I mean, I think a lot of it is like you don't know what you don't know. And when you first start a brand, like I thought I knew everything. I thought I was going to be able to do this. I was like, oh, I'm going to start this brand. I'm going to sell out right away. This is going to be amazing. Like I have this vision. I'm so creative. And, I launched the brand, and I think like I got 5 sales, and 4 of them were my family members. So it's very like, there's been a lot of learnings around, like you were saying to me actually, around patience, time management, expectations also. Trusting the process, I would say. And then also like sorry,
no, do it.
Swearing, but money, it's the hardest part. Like my background in retail, there was it was never my money I was spending on
Yeah.
doing product development.
Right.
There was a whole separate team doing marketing for the products that we launched.
Right.
Now to be responsible for all of it and to realize how important all of that is in
Yeah.
selling something.
Yeah.
And then even just coming up with the money, like as much as I love the and commit to the idea of this being like a core everyday item, and the brand to really not have an element of seasonality. Part of that also is that I don't have the money to be able to be releasing full collections every quarter, depending on the season, right? A lot of bigger brands, that is, when I look at the brands that I would want to, kind of North Star as examples of candle brands that I think are doing really well and also doing interesting things, they are releasing a constant flood of new scents or new vessels, new packaging, at least every quarter. And for me, I've released 2 lines over 3 years, which is kind of, a bit more of a slow burn.
Right.
But it's accepting that that's what is financially feasible for me with the brand right now. Even beyond candles, I would have thought when I started this that I would have already been into other categories by now. Because like I said, I really see Vigyl more as a lifestyle brand than a candle brand. I think candles is just where we started. But
it is what it is.
Where do you find the money to do that expansion, And because I self-funded everything, I'm working studio client work to bring in money to be able to keep building Vigyl because that's my dream.
Yeah.
It might seem crazy because I could have probably just been a lot more comfortable just doing the studio work, but the brand piece has been, it's like a baby to me now.
Yeah.
Like now I need to keep pushing and keep building it more. And like baby's got to eat. Like that's how I feel. So I have to keep working. And I know that that's going to come. Like I know eventually I will be able to expand.
Yeah.
That is kind of part of what I'm working on right now, is figuring out like what is Vigyl in other spaces, like beyond candles. What does that look like? Visually, I can see it, but it's like what actually makes sense for the brand and for the customer that met Vigyl through candles.
Yeah.
What are those items?
Yeah.
And it's an exciting process. I think it's going to be things that even I haven't worked on before. Which will be fun.
Yeah. I think like it's really important for people to hear that, because I feel at the end of the day, this actually kind of marks the difference between maybe what we traditionally buy and kind of fall into these very almost capitalist cycles of just continuously buying new things because they're new to us or they're being introduced as new to us, versus things that are independently produced where there is more this element of a labor of love and there's a passion behind what drives it and there's reality behind what drives it, right? I think there's an authenticity to giving product that actually feels real versus product that just feels like this is just like a run-of-the-mill product, right? And I think that for me, like when you talk a lot about that story and when you describe that struggle and kind of like that process for you, that for me, like, and again, I can't speak for all consumers because all consumers are not like that, but that's what attaches me to a brand, right? At the end of the day, like I know that you are literally doing this because you genuinely love to do this, but you're also doing this because you want this to be the best it could possibly be because you genuinely do care, right? Yeah. And right now we don't develop product with that same sensibility. We develop product with the sensibility of like, how quickly is it accessible? How quickly can it be on the market? How quickly can it be used up? And then how quickly can I turn this over? Yeah. Right? And I think that when you make something with
that's capitalism, right?
It is capitalism.
I don't, not to interrupt you, but like, I think a lot of people with small businesses have a way of thinking that is like, well, I wish more people would support small businesses. And I wish like, but the reality is like, I don't have a hard on for big retail. Right. Like it is my job to do something, to create something that convinces the consumer to buy what I'm putting out versus someone else. It's not their job to be like, oh, by the way, when you're done shopping here, go to the small business. Like that's never going to happen. No. And also like every business was a small business at some point. So those big retailers, you know what I mean? Like,
they came from somewhere.
And I hope to, like, it would be amazing to have a huge business at some point, Right. But I think that, there is a lot of storytelling and thought that goes into products. But like I said, I used to work for one of the biggest retailers, the biggest retailer in Canada. And we were producing a couple hundred products new every year. And I wouldn't argue that there was no thought behind them. Like the team that worked for me that was designing them put a lot of themselves into those products, and like there was a lot of attention to detail, and there was a lot of passion behind that as well. So, I mean, you can probably tell us, but I love product. Like I'm a product person.
Yeah.
I love understanding the ins and outs of how everything is made, and I have an appreciation for it
100%.
because nothing is just like. I mean, there are items that are just off the shelf, bought, manufactured overseas, and just brought in. But I think, I think consumers know what those are, and I think that the things that do really well are the things that connect with people, whether that's an item that you found at a big retailer or an item that you found from a small independent business, and that's really like that's again why I started Vigyl. I really wanted to try and push that envelope. Like, okay, I know it's kind of working in the big retail space, but where can I push and what levers can I pull to like if something is a bit more interesting and a little bit more out of the box, will people gravitate towards it? Like, can I kind of capture some? I use the word vibe a lot, but I don't know if there's a better word for it. But can I capture that feeling or that vibe in a different way?
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm doing.
No, absolutely. I feel like I think that is truly spot on to how it actually presents. So I feel like you have been kind of successful in that regard to kind of like communicate that to us.
Thanks.
When it comes to where you are, where you started, and kind of if someone was very curious about like, I want to start this journey and I want to get into something of my own, what kind of advice would you give them? Like what piece of advice would you give them?
If you want to start your entrepreneurial journey and do it, and what advice would I give them? I would say, well, 100% I would say go for it.
Yeah.
Anytime someone ever talks to me about wanting to start a business, like, you will never regret it.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you might do that you regret.
Yeah.
Small decisions that you make along the way, but you don't regret the act of actually starting. At least I don't. I don't know anyone that has really. So I would say, I think if you feel it in your gut strong enough that you want to do it, then you're more likely to regret that you didn't do it, I would say. And then I would say that make sure whatever you're doing, you're still able to feed yourself, because it very quickly you can run out of money and start losing money very quickly. And then the third thing I'd say is start making connections, because the biggest advances that I've been able to make with Vigyl, whether that's myself as an entrepreneur growing or taking my creative to the next level, or engaging with a new audience because someone that I was able to connect with and believed in me or believed in the brand promoted it. Like, you need to get really comfortable with putting yourself out there, because it's going to be constant trying to make new connections. And for me, like I'm not as good as that, or wasn't as good as that in the past, with being like vulnerable or being open to meeting people, making friends, and putting myself out there. I consider myself a very nice person, but I'm not. I get anxious and I get nervous. And so to be able to, reach out to someone and ask for help, or ask to meet with them, or ask to grab a coffee with them because they're doing something that I think is in the direction that I want to go, that took a lot of nerve for me. But the quicker you can get comfortable with that, the better.
The better.
Yeah.
When I know you're still in the process of figuring out what's next for Vigyl, but what can you give us a preview maybe of what is coming next for Vigyl?
What I would say is that so like I kind of said in the beginning with Vigyl, I was thinking really around this idea of like a moment for yourself, ritual observance, that type of vibe. I'm kind of expanding beyond that. I guess where my process is at this point is figuring out, okay, what happens next? So, you light your candle, then what? And I want to build the brand around that experience. As opposed to, a lot of people see a candle as the finishing touch. Even in my, even in my story about cleaning my house, my mom was the last thing we cleaned the house. The candle was the reward. And then end of the story. For with Vigyl, what I want to do is so you light the candle. Actually, that's the beginning of the story,
Right.
and what comes after
After
that.
that, I love
Because
that.
I think like
Yeah.
candles are a mood, right? Like you
Yeah.
light a candle, like it can be a finishing touch, or it can be
Yeah.
a sexy start to a night.
Night.
You know
No,
what I mean?
100%. And I feel like that ritualistic element to what a candle is it's everything. I mean, it's why I light scent in my house all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like there's an intention behind why I'm doing it. And maybe sometimes it is the end of something, but also sometimes I feel like it is also the beginning of something, right?
Often it is the
And I
beginning.
think it's the beginning. Yeah, I genuinely feel that way. So
Because like think about when you're hosting,
Yeah.
you have friends over. Like
yeah, you wouldn't like
I
candles
always make
everywhere.
sure I light a candle half an hour
Yeah.
before people come over
Yeah.
because it takes that long for it to get enough spread in the room that someone's gonna walk in my house and be like, "Oh, what is that? What are you burning?" You know. And it's often then that's the start to a great night. So it's like
100%.
I'm trying to get build the next phase of Vigyl around what comes after.
I love that. Where can people find you now if they're looking for Vigyl?
So everyone can find Vigyl at vigyl.ca
Mhm.
and on Instagram
Yeah.
@_Vigyl.
Yeah.
I pump out like pretty frequent content.
You do. I think that's also the reason to follow. Like some of the content is so fire that I love the visuals. That's kind of what always reminds me. That sticks in my mind a lot of the
Yeah.
time. So
I hope people follow. Like I could use more followers.
people will follow. People should follow.
To your other question about what to tell people, like
Yeah.
if they're starting a business, like lower your expectations.
Oh.
Because just lower them because it's easier to go up than it is to go down. And
Yeah.
building an audience takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
You think you're going to get a ton of followers just because you have great images. That's not true.
Yeah.
I lose more followers when I post stuff than I gain.
No,
you know?
and that's very much the reality of social right now.
Yeah.
No, I love that piece of advice because I feel like you always like you cannot be disappointed if you have had set a low expectation, right? You're either pleasantly surprised or you're super surprised and you're like it's lived above and beyond.
Yeah.
So
and if your expectations are tied
Yeah.
to the joy of why you're doing it, you're going to be disappointed because it will just take so long.
this
Separate
is
them.
the line. This
Yeah.
is that is the line of the moment.
Separate them.
Yes.
Your expectation for joy should be up here, but your
Right.
expectation for reward should be, keep it modest.
Yeah.
Because it is, you'll kill one with the other, basically.
No, it's very true. And I feel like that is the perfect way to kind of like encapsulate all of it, right? Like I think your joy is your joy. And I think that's kind of what pushes you as an entrepreneur is really that element of joy, because that's what gets you up. That's the motivator. That's everything. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, no. It was very,
Love
very
that.
cool to listen to how you actually got here because I feel like I had an idea. I feel like my ideas now are very different. So it's been really nice.
Better or
refreshing.
worse?
No, better and very real. Like I feel like I don't know. It's always insightful. And like we spoke about earlier, like for me, the journey is everything. It's one thing to see a finalized product, but it's the excitement for me is always like, how did they get there? And that's also what keeps me attached to certain things, right? So,
Yeah.
no, it was very, very cool to hear about this. So thank you for sharing
Yeah,
a lot of that.
for
And thank
having
you
me.
for